students. They are so lovely to interact with. So what a honor for us. What a privilege for us to meet one of the greatest experts of space, solar system. What can I say? I have no words to explain your versatility. You are all rounder. So
you are entirely too kind, and it is my privilege to be with all of you. I wanted to let you know I was really impressed with your questions. Guys, it's like, here's the real story. I started probably when I was 10 years old. It's like inspired by a teacher to love the solar system. And so you are very, very, very lucky to have a teacher as you do that is so excited about exploration and sharing all of that with you. But I grew up in a very small town in the US, in the country. My dad was a plumber, my mom was a seamstress. And to think that from very, like, it's like my parents did not think about space or science. It was just to make a living and provide for their kids. And, I always loved music and theater and those kinds of things, but I also always loved my science and space. So really, it's like when I think about who I am today, it's that I've been president of Explore Mars. I'm on the board of governors for the National Space Society. I'm the 2022 Sally K. Ride Excellence in Education Award winner. I'm a NASA Solar System Ambassador. I'm on the board of advisors for a company called Above Space that will be one of the commercial kind of like space stations. You guys know that the International Space Station will be retired by 2030, and either a commercial space company is probably going to potentially buy the ISS and refabricate it, or kind of like update it in some way, or it'll entirely be decommissioned and people will be looking to have somebody else, very much. But so I'm very lucky to have all the opportunities that I do. Back in 2021, CNN, the news outlet, of all things, it was right in the middle of COVID, and we had this 8-hour long webinar and kind of live stream about the landing of the Perseverance rover. And at some point during that day, one of the producers from CNN called and said, we would love to have Janet speak and talk about the Perseverance rover on CNN. And I just want to encourage you guys that it's like, they could ask a lot of other experts. They could have anybody there from NASA. But apparently, from that moment, and even this past Sunday, I was on CNN, they liked the way that I interpret and explain science or communicate science in a way that is kind of applicable or easy to understand for the general audience. And that doesn't mean that I'm trying to dumb down science at all. It's basically, I want you to think about too, it's like, how can I share what I love the most in a way that the general public or the space curious, not like the space super serious scientists, but how can I get other people on board to care about science? And that is so critical. And that's where I think my love of theater and expression and music and that sort of thing really has helped me, is that I understand the performance part that is also fantastic when it comes to science communication. And so that is what I'll also encourage you. Please be an entire galaxy of things. I am the CEO of my own company. Probably the thing that I'm most proud of is that I started Janet's Planet back in the year 2000. And to see where it has come from, I mean, we had very humble beginnings. And again, just know that if you continue to press on in the direction of something that you truly believe in, maybe not everybody, the entire world may not be your fan, but you will find your audience. And that really, I can't even begin to tell you how true that is. It's like there will be an outlet for you to do whatever science it is that you are interested in. So that's me in a nutshell. So
Excellent student, I would like to ask a question. Namaste from India. Here my question is, where does space end?
oh, that is a beautiful question, and something that astronomers and astrophysicists are pondering, especially with this new discovery. Have you seen that picture of the 6 galaxies that the James Webb Space Telescope discovered? And basically, these 6 galaxies that were recently kind of spotted, or a picture were taken up by the James Webb Space Telescope, really begin to knock on the door of this question. Because if currently by cosmological models we say that the universe is 13.8 13.9 billion years old, and that moment that everything began was that moment of the Big Bang, or the big breath, as I've heard cosmologists refer to it. If we consider that we could possibly condense that 13.8 13.9 billion years in a 24-hour day, where midnight is when the Big Bang happens, then these six galaxies would have come in around kind of like probably 200 300 million years into the process. So what you're talking about is like, you're scratching your head and going, that would mean in this compressed 24-hour time span that these 6 galaxies would have all been well formed at about 43 minutes after midnight. So there's been a new paper that is going, is the universe older, twice as old as we have thought that it is? Are all our cosmological models wrong? Have we gotten it all right? Has the universe always existed, and that time when kind of like 13.8 13.9 billion years ago, was that just a reignition of galaxy formation? So to answer your question, we don't have a really great answer. Is there a beginning? Is there an end? I mean, when you think about how much sky, from kind of like any telescope we've ever been able to look through, to like Hubble, James Webb, in like shortly Euclid, which was just launched. Euclid, EUCLID, is going to be really basically trying to help us understand what 95% of our universe is made of: dark energy, dark matter, which we have zero clue about. But we've only been able to even kind of visualize like just a very small amount of our universe in totality. So does it have an end? Has it always been? And where we're measuring time from the Big Bang, is just our own little corner of sky? These are huge questions that I believe, my young dear, that you can be on a path to potentially answer and discover. But the more that we know, the more questions that arise, and we inch ever closer to those answers. But the question you're asking, the greatest of minds are asking themselves as well. And the real answer at this moment is, we just don't know.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Girls, Dugrala girls, are you there? Dugra girls, yes, unmute your microphone and ask the question.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is Meenakshi. I'm from the Girala Girls High School. Our question is, how can we develop human habitable atmosphere on Mars?
So the way that we're going to do that, I think, for a while, I'm not sure you're aware, there was the goal of getting humans to Mars by 2033. And I think that's going to be pushed out. I think the closer date for humanity to actually venture there is closer to 2045. And I tell you why. Because we still have to develop a spacesuit that's impervious to radiation, that really can protect humans on the surface of Mars. I think the first times that we go, like, I have heard a lot of people talk about habitats and architecture on Mars, that we need to start sending robots there now to possibly, the best place for us to go would kind of be close to the equator. It can get up to 70, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm so sorry. I live in a country that we're still on Fahrenheit and not Celsius, but I think 70 degrees would be, say, around 15 to 22 degrees Celsius. But it's like you got 100-degree temperature differential. So it could be, negative that, at nighttime. But I think the equator, or close to the equator, is where we're going to send humans first, because at least we wouldn't be fighting so much of that. We're going to be living underground in lava tubes, but you're going to either need to pre-send or pre-stage, if you will, any kind of building equipment, any kind of building materials. There have been proposals that we might 3D print habitats on Mars out of the Martian soil. But imagine, a 3D printer large enough to, make a habitat is going to be very, very big. So pre-staging, I think, is one way. I think partially delivering, equipment, supplies. We just found out with Perseverance, with that MOXIE, MOXIE, MOXIE instrument, that we can take carbon, the Mars air is 95% carbon dioxide, that we can, take carbon dioxide and convert it into oxygen, which becomes life support for the astronauts as well as a fuel source. So I think pre-staging is going to be key. I think there's another gentleman named Dr. Daniel Tompkins who thinks if we could somehow transport greenhouses that were already growing plants that can produce plastic, then by the time humans arrive, they could take some of those plants, convert, kind of extract plastic, and then 3D print. I think the first human missions probably will be kind of like either we'll move an orbiter out there. If you look at Buzz Aldrin's plan, is to have kind of like this orbiter, going around Mars, and then humans just land and kind of explore the planet and then return to kind of like a space station or an orbiting platform. The problem is the Martian atmosphere is super thin. Radiation is going to be a humongous problem. There are perchlorates in the Martian soil that are very harmful to the human thyroid. So I still think we're still about 20 years before we have all of the systems, all of the architecture, all of the life support systems to keep a human safe before we get humans there. But I think that you guys will see it in your lifetime. In fact, it's very possible that someone among you will be the first person, our first people to put their footprints on Mars. But, it's going to take everything from figuring out how do we manufacture food? Is that a cellular bioreactor where you take cells of, possible animals? Will we all be vegetarian or vegan when we go to Mars? Because, meat will be too hard, or fish, or that sort of thing to replicate. So these are the things I want you to think about. What are we going to eat? How can we have individualized medicine? Because what you nutritionally need will be entirely different from someone my age and what I would need. How can we create almost like a there is a company, you should look it up. It's actually pretty delicious. I've gotten to test it. It's called Astreas, Astreas. And what happens is there's all of the nutritional, basically what an astronaut needs for a day on Mars inside this hazelnut truffle. There's magnesium, glutathione, vitamin D, calcium, all of those things. So again, even if you're thinking about being a physician and thinking about how you can protect eyesight, because a long-term mission, somebody else's question I know, or one that's pondered, is, can we get there any faster? And, you know, right now we can't travel faster than the speed of light. So we have to wait for Mars. It's pretty much every couple of years is the perfect time to launch, because it's in the right position orbitally from the time it launches here on Earth to land on Mars as soon as possible. But that's still right now easily a 6 to 7 month journey, even when Mars is in the exact best position when we launch, you know, or will be in the best position by the time we get there from launch from Earth. So your question is a great one. And that was one that really that we were trying to answer, and we'll try to answer again with this Mars Innovation Challenge. What could you create that could sustain life for a very long time? But a brilliant question. And just Google some answers, whether that's by habitats. There's also a place called Nuwa City, Nuwa, that's been designed by Alfredo Munoz. And he's already looking at how we could kind of like live in these closed systems inside a lava cave, and they're beautiful. So, but there will take a lot of pre-staging and a lot of kind of radiative protection for humans to do so.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Digirala boys.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Good evening, ma'am. This is Tanisha.
Good evening.
I have a question for you, ma'am.
Sure.
What is the status of the Starship program?
The status of the
Starship program.
Okay, so that is very interesting. It's like they're making strides. And again, every time, you know, the last kind of launch, did you guys watch that? Where it's like not all of the engines kind of fired at the same time and there was the explosion, right? But some of the brightest minds ever are working on that. And every time they do another test, it's another step closer to not only the moon and getting back there, but also to Mars. You know, the Elon is one company, and finally Blue Origin is another company who won NASA's kind of like bid to develop a lunar lander. And so for the moon, for kind of like going to the moon. And I think, again, SpaceX is brilliant, but I tell you, there are other companies that are on the heels of them. Did you guys at all see a company called Relativity Space? They're actually 3D printing rockets. Now, they tried their first launch back in March. They made it to max Q, which kind of like is one of the tests of a rocket. It's like, you know, their maximum kind of like speed, but it didn't make it to orbit. They right now can 3D print a rocket in 60 days. So it's like Starship is definitely the leading the way, but I think it's still, again, to be human rated. I mean, you're going to see Artemis 2 launch in November of 2024 and test out the Orion system and just do the flyby of the moon. And it's going to, like, you know, we did that with Artemis 1, but now we're going to carry humans. And then, you know, in the next few years, so we're eventually going to have these landers and Starship ready as we kind of like go forward with the Artemis plan. But I think it's coming along, and, you know, it must be great to be SpaceX and have, you know, a ton of money that if you blow one rocket up, you just build another. But I know that they've got several Starships waiting to be assembled and waiting to test. And hopefully, you know, SpaceX is smart and it's led by CEO Gwen Shotwell. And I think we'll see that the interesting thing will be the moon will be the testing ground. And if it lands successfully on the moon, you know, SpaceX for a long time and Elon Musk has said they want then Starship to, you know, be getting people onto Mars. But again, we'll have to have a lot of things thought about and pre-staged there. But I think we just have to keep watching. But it's definitely got forward momentum. Thank you for your question.
Good evening, ma'am. This is Jessica, an 8th grade student. Namaste from India. I would like to ask you a question. Here, my question is: does life exist outside of the solar system?
Oh, you know what? I love this question, Jessica. I absolutely love it. I want you to learn a phrase that my friend Dr. Jim Garvin taught me, and it is called agnostic, AGNOSTIC biosignature, BIOSIGNATURE, agnostic biosignature. And the reason that particular phrase is important is because when we ask, is there life out there in our universe? The problem with even knowing if stars that exist in the habitable zone, that's where we live, right? The Earth is in the habitable zone, or HZ, or kind of like the Goldilocks zone of our planet. Oops, where do we all go? Did they come back? Come back, Jessica. Oh, there you go. And so it's like, you know, I don't know if in India you guys know the story about Goldilocks. It's not too hot, not too cold, that sort of thing. But that's where we live. But the problem becomes is like there are many planets that we've observed in exoplanetary systems and other galaxies, that planets that exist in this kind of perfect place in relationship to their home star. The problem is that there's so many light years between us. I mean, the closest kind of system is what, 42, 44 light years away. You multiply that by 5.9 trillion, you know, miles. And so we just can't get there. And, you know, while we can look at things through infrared light and go, wow, this is like, you know, there's I can't remember the whole entire designation, but there's an exoplanet that is very Earth-like that we've observed. And it, like, by every calculation, it has its own atmosphere. It has water. It probably has temperatures similar to Earth's. So one would gather, and it's like, what do we know about water? Wherever there is water, there's the potential for life. But what my friend Dr. Jim Garvin says, that we need to be looking for things called agnostic biosignatures. And what that means is life as we don't know it. And so you'll kind of go, what did she just say? Life as we don't know it. So we all know life here on Earth. We all know kind of like you know, the processes for life, from like the, you know, super cosmic to the kind of like very microcosm kinds of things, from bacteria to, you know, even neutrinos or things that exist out there. So I do believe that life exists somewhere out there, with as many, like all the billions of stars and galaxies that are out there. There must, I mean, come on, we can't possibly be the only planet with life on it. I think the bigger question is, it life as we know it? Are there dogs and cats or whales or, you know, all kinds of fantastic animals and humans? Or is it some other kind of life, some other sentient kind of life? That is the bigger thing. You know, even in the atmosphere of Venus, they just discovered phosphine, and phosphine is a biosignature of life. But I wouldn't think that anything like human would be living in, you know, in or on Venus because it's so extremely hot with its extreme global warming. But it's what we're the same things we're wondering about on Mars. You know, the Perseverance rover is currently caching samples, and in 2026, when that rover lands on Mars, it will be carrying a European Space Agency little spacecraft. They will gather all that kind of like cached soil samples, and then those samples will be returned to Earth and arrive about 2031. That, and they're digging in this kind of like ancient riverbed, and it'll be interesting to see if that we can finally humanly take a look at this under a microscope and see if there's any kind of microscopic life or fossilized life. Did life ever even attempt to begin on Mars? But that's just within our solar system. I think there is life, and what that looks like, I have no clue. But I think we need to start thinking about agnostic biosignatures, life as we don't know it. How might other life look or exist? Is it more intelligent than us? Some would say about our planet, we certainly hope so, right? But it remains to be seen. There are enough of planets that have been examined by great programs like Kepler. I mean, you've got the one that it's like kind of the interesting thing, I doubt life exists at all, is kind of the nightmare planet, right? Where it rains glass sideways. I mean, we know that kind of planet exists out there, but we've also seen like much larger Earths that exist outside our solar system within the habitable zone that we know that house water. So I'm going to go with yes, I surely hope so, but it might be an entirely different kind of life form or life specimen that is not at all similar to humans. That'll be the interesting thing if we can ever find a way to communicate with other galaxies and other solar systems.
Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. I am so privileged to interact with you. Namaste from India. Here my question is, what are the biggest challenges of being an astronaut?
You know, what I know of, and when I've talked to many of the people that have gone to space and become astronauts, if you're talking about becoming an astronaut, say through NASA or traditional means, it's the preparation and it's the applications. Many astronauts for NASA, they didn't get chosen their first time. They didn't get chosen their second time. It might have been the fourth or fifth kind of application. Sometimes it's taken 10 to 14 years. For astronaut Don Thomas, it took him a process of 10 years and 4 applications to become an astronaut. When I interviewed Commander Chris Hadfield, one of the things that he said that was the hardest is that, you know, it took him almost 25 years from the time that he knew he was wanted to go to space, wanted to be an astronaut, got accepted, and then finally went to space, is that you might learn something hypothetically in a classroom, and then you're finally in space and you need to kind of like, something happens on the International Space Station or something happens inside the rocket you're traveling on, and then all of a sudden you need to be able to, you know, pull up that information and use it in that regard. So for Commander Chris Hadfield, who was from Canada, he said that it was sort of remembering and stowing away all of that information that, you know, it might never be needed, but on the day that you need it, being able to kind of withdraw that information from your knowledge bank. Other people say that it's like sometimes the hardest part was making sure that you could get along well with your crew. It's definitely the psychological kind of process of getting, you know, being able to work well with a team. The other thing that I found interesting when I interviewed a gentleman who had been chief astronaut at NASA, He said that the one person that he would never choose to be an astronaut was the perfectionist. He said one day he observed this guy who nearly every time was perfect in docking, in kind of like in the simulator, was perfect in docking the space shuttle to the International Space Station. I mean, he was like, astronaut Hoot said, he said, I was probably going to choose him. He was like, he seemed to be the most cool, calm and collected, best pilot ever. He goes, until the day that he wasn't. And he goes, I was observing him going, you know what? You're getting close to being chosen to be an astronaut. The day that it didn't go perfectly and the guy kind of crashed in the simulation, not even the real rocket, just in the simulator, he started throwing things and like being mad and lost his temper. And Hoot said at that minute, he was like, no, you will never go to space on any team that I would ever choose, because in that moment that the guy got all upset and was throwing things and, you know, acting crazy, is that your entire crew could die because you did not keep a good and level head. So part of the struggle too of being an astronaut, I don't know if you guys ever read Scott Kelly's book about his year on the International Space Station, is just kind of like staying mentally healthy, that he started to really miss home. He started to miss his children. He started to miss fresh air. And so it's like a couple of astronauts had their mission extended by over 6 months, and they're just now returning on, I think, the Soyuz, because there was something that went wrong with one of the Soyuz vehicles. There was some leak that people couldn't explain what was happening. They didn't know if there was some kind of sabotage. So imagine you've been sent on a mission that you think is going to be 6 months, then it ends up being almost a year or a year and 2 months. And now you got to continually stay busy. They say the most successful astronauts are ones, especially on long duration missions to the ISS, are ones that stay on task, the ones that like kind of keep to their routine, the ones that exercise, the ones that kind of like know when they need quiet, know to keep kind of engaged with everybody. But the mental kind of like aptitude and determination you have to have, even if you're going out for a spacewalk. Do you know that in their pressurized gloves, it's like it is so hard to, like, if they're outside doing a spacewalk, that sometimes the astronauts will come back inside and have lost their fingernails during a 5 to 9 hour spacewalk. And so just to have that mental fortitude to go, even if my hands are hurting, even if my fingernails have come off, even if like my visor is fogging up, how do I keep my cool? So mainly everything that I've ever heard from any astronauts has been, you have to have incredible perseverance and persistence. You have to absolutely know that you are willing to do and make every sacrifice and study whatever you need to study to become one. And then when chosen, it doesn't matter that maybe you're not best friends with your entire crew, but every other crewmate's life is depending on you doing your job, and your life is depending on all of them doing their job well. So it's in your best interest to be a good crewmate to everyone, despite your likes or dislikes. So it isn't just about, oh, I've got the degree in aerospace, or I'm an engineer and I've got my master's degree, or I'm a pilot. All of those things can, sometimes be required. But the bigger thing is, can you keep your cool? Can you be adaptable? Can you be flexible? Can you put the needs of your crew above your own? Those tend to be the grander challenges. Can you stay on task even if you're bored or homesick or exhausted? So all of those things tend to be some of the difficulties they talk about.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering.
Sanjana, my question
What is the biggest form in the space?
What is the biggest what?
What is the biggest form in the space?
Oh, wow. That is a great question. What is the biggest form in space? It's like you've got grand things out there, right? You've got big, humongous planets. It's like you've got neutron stars. You've got golly, let me think about this for a minute. This is a great question. It's like I think there's one thing, and if I'm thinking of it correctly, there's the biggest thing ever in space is called the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall. And basically, it is this cluster of galaxies and quasars that span about 10 billion light years. So again, if you start to do the math on that and you're going 10 billion times 5.9 trillion, right? And then you get that, of course, in miles and not kilometers. And it was discovered by mapping these locations of where gamma ray burst, which are these powerful explosions that occur when a massive star dies. And it's the largest structure in the observable universe. And it's kind of like basically this kind of like humongous galactic bubble that contains countless of galaxies, but it's called the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall. So that is the largest structure or form that I know of in the universe. Time?
Can't we design any spacecraft that travels to another planet within 2 or 3 hours?
That's again that kind of big question. Can we create something that can travel so fast, or can we discover some way to kind of like travel faster than the speed of light? And right now we don't have a spacecraft that can really take us any faster. Current spacecraft go about 17,500 miles per hour, which that are human rated, right? And so when you think about any trip to Mars, like can we, when you think about the spacecraft New Horizons, got the highest ever, I think set the highest ever launch speeds at around 36,000 miles per hour, but there weren't any humans on board. And then a year later, it gets a gravity assist from Jupiter and it starts traveling about 51,000 miles per hour. So the question becomes, how much speed can you really, if humans are traveling in a spacecraft, how much speed, how many G's can a human body take? But right now we just don't have a spacecraft that can travel faster than the speed of light. If we ever get there, then we could travel pretty much, anywhere. But again, even when we're talking about the greatest structure, the largest structure in the universe, it's like we just haven't developed that quite yet.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. It's an honor to ask you a question. This is Joshna, an 8th grade student. I would like to ask you a question. My question is, as it has less gravity, can we walk on Mars? Can we walk on Mars?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Yes, at 38% gravity, we could walk. Now, imagine this though, my friend. It's like, imagine that it's like, it would be a walk where it would be almost as if you could hop a little bit. I don't know if any of you guys play soccer, but imagine playing soccer with 38% Earth's gravity. You talk about being able to bend that ball and do the most amazing hat tricks ever. And so, yes, you can walk on Mars, just like you can walk on the moon. The moon has 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. So if you say, for example, that you might weigh 60 pounds here on planet Earth, you'd only weigh 10 pounds on the moon. Same if you weigh 100 pounds on Earth, you'd only weigh 38 pounds on Mars. So, you know, in a lot of ways, it's like, you know, it wouldn't be at all the same. The problem here is that while it would be easy to maneuver and jump and maybe, you know, get about on Mars, imagine this, you kind of build your habitat on 3 levels. What if it's like you don't really need to use the stairs, you just kind of jump and you could maybe, you know, jump to that next level. The problem becomes in lessened gravity, or in circumstances where there is microgravity, is that your bones go through a process called decalcification, and your bones lose calcium. So the bigger issue of walking on Mars is that Axiom, AXIOM, is a space company that's gotten the go-ahead from NASA, and they've developed a spacesuit that is much lighter. Normal spacesuits weigh anywhere from 200 to 250 pounds, and so when you're thinking about that's like carrying around a very large, like kind of football kind of guy in you know, in addition to yourself. But again, unless in microgravity, it doesn't weigh that much. But the hope is that you could have a better spacesuit on Mars, move about much more easily, but you'd have to really make sure as you're walking. And what if, you know, the biggest thing too about, I mean, think about your muscles. It's like your muscles atrophy if you're not exercising. And what is a big muscle in your body that we don't normally, you know, we think about our calf muscles, or, you know, our biceps and triceps, but our heart is a huge muscle. So one of the things we're going to have to do on Mars is to constantly be exercising, taking our calcium and magnesium, because you don't want to all of a sudden get used to this 38% gravity, and then your heart doesn't have enough heart pumping power if, for example, you need to take off in a dead run. But yeah, you could totally walk. But the other cool thing is that you would also probably be able to hop, and everything would just feel lighter. I got a chance to go on a zero gravity flight. And it's basically and do those parabolic flight maneuvers. And basically the plane is going up at about 45 degrees. And then as it tops kind of the curve, the pilots reverse the engines. So the plane is falling, everything inside the plane is falling, and you experience about 20 to 25 seconds of microgravity. So one of the first parabolas they did kind of like, they gave us a feeling of what Martian gravity would feel like. And guess what I could do? I could do fingertip push-ups. It was the easiest push-ups I've ever done or ever will do. And it was this incredible lightness of being. Now, granted, I only experienced it for 20 to 25 seconds, but imagine that all of a sudden you could really move through a space without like this grand effort. I don't know if you've ever gone out hiking or jogging and you're like, oh man, I'm climbing this heavy set of stairs, or I'm climbing this big hill. And I think that it would be like a lot easier, but the same thing would be, it's like you'd have to work a lot harder to make sure that all of your muscles were in good, proper working order.
The question